if I were to find the most judgmental group of people in America today, right, I would have to look to the Christian church. And it's funny because the leader, the person that they so-called worship, right, which is Christ, right, says, "Judge not lest you be judged," right, which that's a verse. So they should, so you would think, that if they're reading it and then you would follow that. You know what I mean?
I bet some of you, maybe a lot of you, have been in a room like this before where you learn about like sharing your faith. You read books, you read the books on like all the apologetics and stuff. And I just want to be really upfront, really direct and tell you, most training like this doesn't work at all. Amen, says Carl. So that's disconcerting. And if you've been in rooms like this, you hear all kinds of things and you read books and you like go to try things with people and it just doesn't work at all, like what Carl was saying. And pastors get really frustrated with stuff like this. They'll do like training class after training class to talk to people and it doesn't work. And it's like the best stuff. And it even makes you feel really good. I don't know if you've ever been in a room where you hear a great sermon and they might even like call you up front and say, we're gonna change the world. People respond and you feel real hyped up, you feel excited, and then you kind of go out and like nothing happens at all. You ever had that? What do you think that is? What's that about, do you think? Don't you think that's worth considering before we try and launch into a whole bunch of material? And I think that's worth considering. So that's what I would like us to look at a little bit. And why I think maybe this training and our time together could be more fruitful. It'd be audacious enough to believe that maybe this time together might actually translate in people's lives being affected that aren't in this room. Because it'd be nice for you to learn some things. But as I've been praying for you and I've been praying for our time together, I actually believe that there's thousands of people that you represent that God wants to touch and intends to use you to reach out to and to show a tangible face and expression of his love. And I don't know, I guess you have some kind of faith to be here because, well, you're here. So let's talk about why generally training like this doesn't work for a minute. Because we need to get that out of the way. So first, I just have a very simple question. Why doesn't evangelism training work? And I have this little cryptic phrase, beating the sheep. And pastors know what language this is, because often in churches we talk about people as being the sheep. And pastors, after just a little bit of doing work, and if you've been in church any amount of time, you realize that guilt is an incredibly powerful motivator. Is it not? I mean, let's be honest. Guilt is a powerful motivator. As we're going into Christmas and New Year's and, all of these different holidays, people make New Year's resolutions. This is the time that there's all the Bally's commercials will come back. Why? Because you're going to feel guilty again and make a New Year's resolution to eat right and work out. And, I'm sure no one's ever done that here, but, there's people that do things like that. And so they prepare you with these barrage of videos of people working out and, that look like Barbie dolls to mess with you. And, in church life often, because we're so motivated about wanting people to share their faith and have people meet Jesus, that sometimes we can use fear and guilt to motivate people. I mean, there's pastors that do that. And there's moments that we read books and we even maybe read the scriptures and we feel motivated, like we need to do something. I have to do something. I don't want, my friends to go to hell. And we'll use language like that, what if you were to drive home tonight and die? Wow, that's a really encouraging thought. Thanks, Pastor. But no, what if? What would you do? How would God let you into heaven? And we use language like that. And what about your friends? And you go, oh my goodness, I don't know. Well, why don't you come up and we'll pray for you and we're going to send you out. And, guilt is usually only powerful. It's only a powerful motivator for a very short amount of time, but it's very strong. And so my impression of a lot of training that we talk to people about sharing their faith is it's kind of guilt driven. People feel beat up. And so they'll go and try something a few times. And if it doesn't work, then they feel even worse. And they think to themselves, I will never do something like that again. The second thing that I think makes it hard is that it feels forced. Have you ever felt like that? Sharing your faith feels forced? You know, like you have to look for an opportunity to talk about Jesus. You got to force something. You know, so somebody's talking about like the trees in their backyard and you say, trees? You know, Jesus hung on a tree. Something like that. And, you know, you're trained to like figure out how to steer conversations and get it to like where you say these few things really quickly. Maybe no one else has, but I have. I've felt like that. And it feels so forced. And really what it feels like is like you're becoming a used car salesman. If you sell cars here, you're great. I love you. This probably doesn't apply to you. But you know, people have a tendency to think of used car salesmen as being a little kind of fast talking, and that they're kind of pulling one over on you, and they put you in the car and they do all these things. And you know, the real challenge of a used car salesman is usually, if you've been in sales of any kind, is to close the deal. And to close the deal today, like right now. If you don't close the deal right now, the sale doesn't count. And you know, if you're in sales of any kind, generally, that if someone leaves your presence, you've lost them. You don't get to close the deal at that point, right? So much of evangelism training, and I'm using that word specifically, we'll talk about that word evangelism as we're together. But evangelism training is to close the deal. It's to make the sell. To get you to that point where you say yes to a set of propositions. Am I just talking to myself? Have you felt that? And so it makes you feel like you have to do something. I personally, and this might show how screwed up I am, but I personally am fascinated with infomercials. Anyone else here like infomercials? I think they're amazing. I think they're amazing pieces of rhetoric. And here's why. In a short time, 30 minutes, someone makes you think you need a product that you don't need from a person that you've never met, and what makes you buy it right then. Do you know what I mean? Like the strainer that folds up, like the wax on your car that you can light a fire on your car and it won't damage your car. Some of you might have these in your garage, but anyway, you know the different exercise equipments of random bending bars, like anyone's ever seen such a thing, and they show you all of these things that will happen. You know, maybe that's in your basement. Actually, that's probably not in your garage. And you know, you have all of these different things, and in a half hour, they move you from not even caring at all about their product to caring about the person, and then wanting to have it, and then buying it. And what ends up happening if you've bought such a thing? Buyer's remorse. Have you ever heard of that term? It's called buyer's remorse. And I think often in our quote unquote evangelism training, we can talk people into things. Train each other to use persuasive arguments and rhetoric like an infomercial to get people to buy. And if you've ever had the terrible experience of sort of pressing and calling someone into a decision to follow Jesus and then watching that, well, seeing that it didn't have an effect in their life and seeing that their life is mostly buyer's remorse, you see that because you were with them and maybe they were at a broken point or a crisis, and so you kind of put to work some training and some evangelistic stuff, and then they buy, but they don't really buy. And you can tell that they haven't really had a life-changing experience with God. And I think that's true. And so I put them, why isn't most of it not make a difference? I think it is that infomercial phenomenon, that buyer's remorse thing. Early on in my life, as I came to know Jesus, I wasn't raised in church at all. And as I met Jesus, I met him just powerfully, like through a personal encounter with him and reading the scriptures. And immediately I wanted to tell some of my friends about him. And so I just would tell my friends about him. And before I knew it was happening, they were like asking me more and more questions about Jesus. And of course, I knew nothing. So I went to like Bible studies, and I would literally just write copious notes from the Bible study. I mean, just like detail every word. And then I'd turn around and just like read that to them because I didn't have any other information. And so as I kind of kept growing with God, I got into different groups of Christian types. And I got this great tool of training, how we can share our faith, evangelistic sharing. And, I learned how to draw pictures and charts and ask people really good pointed questions that lead them to certain places. And then I got all kinds of great apologetic training on, ancient documents and Dead Sea Scrolls. And, because everyone's asking, what about the Dead Sea Scrolls? It's a real pressing desire, people's hearts. Anyway, so I learned all this stuff. And of course, when you learn stuff like that, you just use it. It's important. And so, and I started to see that things began to change just in my own heart, in my own life with people. And it got weirder instead of easier. All the training actually made it harder for me to be with my friends and people that didn't know what was happening to me, didn't know what to do with me because I'd met Jesus. Isn't that bizarre? Does that just strike anyone else as confusing and bizarre? That the more you grow in your life with Jesus and the more kind of training, the more books you read and the more help you get, the more complicated and weird it gets. And it gets harder to love people and be with people. That just seems absolutely backward and upside down. And I think it has to do a lot with what it is we think we're doing when we share our faith with people, that we're trying to get them to close the deal and to buy a couple things, et cetera, et cetera. And my prayer for us in our time together is we sort of break a lot of that down. And we learn how to make this really, really simple. And not just really simple, but that it would be really a part of who we are. That we're not putting on that plaid jacket to sell the car, big name tag. I don't know if you ever feel that feeling, but I feel that feeling. I can have a tendency to think I've got to become something else right now in order to share my faith, in order to really make a witness. And so I guess I want to ask us together to consider one thing right up front, because, to be honest, the rest of what we do will not work at all if we don't kind of deal with first things first right here tonight, which is simply this. You saw my title, that you share what you love. You share what you love. And if we don't have things working right in our own hearts with Jesus, it doesn't matter what we learn. It doesn't matter how guilted we are. It doesn't matter what techniques or thoughts. Sharing with other people has to come from the substance of our own life. And it doesn't come from things we learn or nice quips or quotes or ideas or questions or techniques. It's from the substance of who we are in our own hearts. John 15 is one of my favorite scriptures in the whole wide world. And let me just read you this section. If you haven't spent a lot of time in John chapter 15, I would highly recommend you do if you study the scriptures. And John 15, verse 5, this is Jesus speaking. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do a few things well. Actually, it doesn't say that. It says, apart from me, you can do, nothing. Some of you are like, wow, I didn't think it said that. What Bible version is that? Anyway, verse 6, if anyone does not remain in me, he's like a branch that's thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown in the fire and burned. If you remain in me, my words remain in you. Ask whatever you wish, it will be given to you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Jesus, wanting to clarify what he means by remaining in him, says in verse 9, as the Father has loved me, so I've loved you. Now remain in my love. And skip down to verse 11. It says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Now, the things Jesus says in here are incredibly compelling. He says, first of all, you can do nothing apart from him. Nothing apart from him. Now, if you're reading that and you're thinking, you think to yourself, I can do all kinds of things apart from him. I go to work, I eat my food, I am breathing. I can do all kinds of things What he's saying is you can't do things that matter and last for his kingdom, that you would bear fruit that would last. So that everything that we do in our life with God has to be coming out of a place of intimate relationship with him. Vine and branches, that we are intimately connected. Here's the word picture is so clear that it's kind of silly to talk about anymore, but I'll do it anyway. Imagine like the way my arm is connected to my body. See how my arm's connected to my body? See that? If you can't get that on the video, okay, good. Arm is connected to my body. Okay, now I'm gonna do a neat trick. You ready? You have to watch very, very carefully. Did you see that? I'll do it again. Just maybe you see it on this side. Ooh, no one oohed. It's a pretty amazing trick, actually. What I just did is really complicated. It involved my brain communicating to my muscles, to the tendons. There's blood vessels that run from my body to my arm that make it possible for me to do that. Now, if you lop my arm off my body, that neat trick I just did, it doesn't work anymore. Without, I don't know, maybe a lot of electrodes and really complicated stuff. It doesn't work. And it's because my arm is connected to my body that it's able to do that neat trick. Now that seems like a simple analogy, but that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. As we are not intimately connected to him, as we are not close to his heart, we can do nothing. That's really powerful. He doesn't say that you believe the right things or that you're in the right church. He doesn't say all kinds of things. He says that you're connected to him, his person, his being. Intimacy with him is the beginning of everything. And I think that dictates well in everything we want to talk about here. Clearly, you share what you know and you share what you love. You do those two things. You share what you know and you share what you love. Carl, in this next session, is going to talk about what it is to just know Jesus alone and not to just know a bunch of nice church stuff and Dead Sea Scrolls, etc. But you share what you know. And let me just break that down really quick. I was talking to a guy who's a friend, who's an atheist. And he came to a class we did. We do little meetings together with people that aren't sure where they're at with Jesus. And we were doing a few of these things. And he was there. And he came loaded, his gun loaded, ready to shoot down all the Christians. Have you ever had this encounter? We end up in a conversation. You're like, somebody's going to shoot me. He looks angry. I haven't even met this guy before. So he knew the pastor was going to be there and he wanted to come shoot Christians. I think it's kind of like a hobby for him because he's an atheist and he's like about being an atheist, So he shows up and he goes, so I got one question for you, Pastor. Wow, okay, ready. How can you even know that the scriptures are true? How would you do in that moment? I felt pretty intimidated. And it took about 10 minutes to realize that this guy was much, much smarter than me. I mean, not like twice as smart, like 10 times smarter than me. He's like referring to different ancient languages, like off the top of his head. Well, actually when it says that, it says Barak. Oh, wow, really? I didn't. What language is that? Hebrew. Of course it is. Yes, I'm a pastor. I knew that. It's just so intimidating. He's like referring to Genesis from memory from the Hebrew as an atheist. And we're kind of going back and forth and we're doing this thing and over and over, I just kept not arguing with him. I mean, I just kept saying things like, gosh, I have no idea. Like, you are obviously much smarter than me. And he went, well, what do you mean? You can't answer this question? I have no idea how to answer that question. That's like really complicated and difficult. And he goes, well, wait, what's this time supposed to be about? I go, yeah, maybe somebody misled you. I'm not here to like answer like every objection anyone could ever have. We want to be here to like talk about Jesus and how magnificent, wonderful he is. I mean, have you taken a look at Jesus? And he went, well, I am asking you about Jesus. I go, now you're asking me like Hebrew words from Genesis. I don't understand that, but I understand Jesus. And we talked for an hour about Jesus, and he kept trying to ask me about the Crusades. Suddenly we're talking about the Crusades. I don't know anything about the Crusades, and all kinds of random stuff. It was like so tiring. And so as we just kind of kept going like that, eventually it was a very poignant moment, a very important moment, I think, for our friendship. As he paused and he looked at me and he said, "You keep talking about Jesus. You're not answering any of my questions." I said, "I'm really not trying to avoid you. You're just a lot smarter than me. And you obviously know a lot of stuff I don't know. But you know what? I just want to talk about Jesus. That's why we're here." And he paused. It was a really important moment. He looked at me in the face and he said, "You know him, don't you?" And I went, I do. I know him. I know him." And he went, "Now, how did that happen?" He was so interested in all of these intellectual things, and obviously, like so many people that are in this place, he was just in a lot of pain. He'd been hurt by a lot of church people, a lot of teaching. And, if we would have gone down all of those questions, it would have, I don't know, he probably would have just run circles around me, to be honest. And if I just threw out some little snippet of some book I'd read, it would have just led me to complete embarrassment later, because he probably would have taken it apart and spun it around and stabbed me with it, and I would have just been there crying. Some of you laughing because you felt what that feels like. And but he knew that I knew him. Do you know Jesus? Are you fascinated with Jesus? You personally. I'm not talking to your friend. Are you fascinated with him? Do you just find him compelling in a way that is shocking and unnerving? And when you read about what he says, and when you spend time with him, that he grips you in every part of who you are. You're shaped, you're changed by him. Do you know him like that? See, because when you know him like that, it changes the way you talk. To be fascinated with him, to study him, to study his words, to study the influence he's had throughout history. Changes things when you know him. And it also changes when you love him. He says this thing about remaining in his love. I think probably some of you have been around an annoying dating couple or an engaged couple recently. I say annoying because they're all annoying when they're engaged, because all they can do is talk about each other. It's annoying. You ask them any question, like, "Hey, what have you been doing this week?" It's like, "Well, let me tell you." You're like, "Oh gosh, shut up. This is so annoying." And they'll talk about, all these little details and, and he got the shrimp and I got the chicken and I thought, well, that looked good. And so we just shared. And, I just always wanted to be with someone I could share my life with. And I just, shut up. Blah, blah. Anything you talk about, it goes there, doesn't it? No matter what you do. I mean, no matter what do you think about the moon? I mean, you just try and, we were out looking at the moon and, oh gosh, be quiet. And what is that? You talk about what you love. If you love football, you talk about football. If you love playing golf, you talk about golf. If you love cars, it will come out of you when someone asks you. You talk about what you love, don't you? If you were to look at your conversations over the last week, I imagine that I could figure out what motivates and moves you by what you talk about when given the opportunity. You share what you love. And when you love Jesus, when you know Jesus this way, the phrase I would just say would be that you're codependent on Jesus. That you're codependent. That's this psychological word we use a lot, that's really negative. When people get codependent in relationships and they become unable to operate on their own unless they're with this other person, and that's always a bad thing. But, I think with Jesus, it's the only way to go. I mean, this redefines everything. It redefines how you think about this horrible Christian word called quiet time. Ever heard that word? It's a horrible word. Quiet time, it like denotes sleeping, and at least maybe I'm just confessing right now, but it does for me, Quiet time has taught me how to sleep in various positions, and my head down, my head back, on my side, leaning against a wall. I can, quiet time. But, we're not talking about quiet. We're talking about being with Jesus. If I were to say, let's just blow off the rest of the night, and I just want you to spend time praying and being with Jesus. What does that do to you emotionally? Do you just go, oh, thank you so much, Jay. I was just thinking I'd listen to you guys babble all night. That just sounds so much better. Or do you just go, uh-oh, what's that? That's like an hour and a half or something? I mean, what would I do for an hour? I mean, there's a Starbucks around the corner, I think. Maybe I get some shopping in. That's what I could do, I got this grocery list. I mean, I think some of you are probably writing grocery lists and budget things on your paper, if you're really honest. I've seen church bulletins that get left in the chairs. I could get some of that done. Some of you right now are covering your paper slowly. But, are you codependent? Like that the thought of being with him? I mean, how long can you go without a touch from Jesus? You know what gets dangerous is I think for most of us, we can go maybe even months without being near him, without having our affections stirred by him. I'll tell you, I think the more that we grow with him, the more we become codependent. We can't even imagine going a day without having a connected, close time with him. We can't even imagine what it would be like. We miss him in the busyness of life. And it isn't just Sundays. It isn't just, quiet time like, oh, I got to do this. It's like, I want to be with him. I want to know him. See, I'm talking way outside of being a Christian and being able to check the right boxes on a true-false test. We're talking about, do you know him? Do you love him? Do you remain in his love? Are you abiding in his presence? Are you aware of him? Are you stirred by him? I was on a plane from Columbus, Ohio, back here to Denver, and I was sitting next to a guy who was reading a book on discerning God's will for your life. Dead giveaway, he's a Christian, by a famous Christian author. And I looked over, and I don't know about you, but I know I'm on planes. Sometimes you just want to just sit there and be left alone. That's kind of how I was feeling. And so we're sitting there, and he was too nice, really. He just said, hey, where are you coming from? Why are you going to Denver? Oh, I live in Denver. And what do you do there? I go, oh, different stuff, different stuff. I was trying to avoid where I knew we were going, different stuff. And he goes, well, I work with people. So trying to put my headphones on. And finally I'm like, well, I'm a pastor. And like, oh, you're a pastor, man. Praise the Lord. I'm a Christian. And yeah, I saw the book. And so I'm trying to escape this moment. And I can just sense God kind of pushing on my heart for this guy. And so I asked him a question that I ask people a lot. People that would say that they're Christians ask this question a lot. And there's some people here from our church, and they hear this question a lot. But the question I ask a lot is, I just looked at him and said, tell me what you love about Jesus. What do you love about Jesus? And he kind of was jarred. He looked back, he kind of shook back a little bit, and he went, well, in 1987, I was saved. I was in a church and blah, blah, blah. And he went through this whole long thing. It was like a 15-minute deal. I could tell it was very well prepared, probably from a training time like this. And it was really, really good. Clean, precise, good. Went through the whole thing, bang, front to back. And he goes, so there you go. And good, all right. And he kind of went back to his book, and I went to put my headphones on. And I just went, oh, man, can't let this go. And so I took my headphones off, and I said, man, you're probably never going to see me again. We'll call him Bob. I said, Bob, you're never going to see me again. So can I just be real honest with you? He said, sure. I said, I think that was a bad answer. And he went, really? Why? I said, I asked you, what do you love about Jesus? And you told me something from 1987. That's just really bizarre to me. I said, if I were to ask you, what do you love about your wife? And you said, well, we were married 10 years ago. All the husbands are laughing. The wives are scowling a bit. But you know, you would be in trouble, man. If you said that, you'd be in trouble. And I said, I think it's about where you are with Jesus, not just what you've done or what you think. Are you connected in? Do you know him? Are you in love with him? And it's about movement and momentum. And this is all stuff we're going to talk about tonight. So we sit down and I'm drawing, this little picture you're going to see later about moving towards Jesus and different things like that. And as we're talking, there's a girl leaning through the chairs that I could see her face through the crack in the chairs. And I turned around and she flew back. And, because planes are really small, you can hear for, it seems like the whole plane, really. And so I look over the chairs. I go, were you listening? She goes, I'm so sorry. I just found that really interesting. I said, well, come on, join the discussion. And she looks over and I'm really pressing this guy. I said, who cares if you're a Christian? Like, what difference does that make? Christians need Jesus. Have you given your life fully to Jesus? Are you following Jesus? Do you know him? And we're going through this and he says, well, so it doesn't matter what I've believed or what I've said. And we're going back and forth. He's kind of arguing with me. He's getting riled up. He's getting mad. And I just said, yeah, Jesus attracted people no matter who they were. And it's about knowing him and what you love about him, being fascinated with him and growing with him. And this girl blurts out in the middle of me speaking. She goes, what if I'm a lesbian? And I looked at Bob. I said, what do you think, Bob? And he put his head down. He just put his head down. Seriously. He put his head down and he just goes, I don't know. Sweetest thing ever, this girl, because he was in a crisis. I was creating a crisis for him. And she puts her hand on his shoulder and says, it's all right. It's okay. And she says, well, what do you think? And I said, I only have one question for you. Do you want Jesus? Are you interested in Jesus? And she went, man, I really am. I thought it meant all this other stuff. I'm really interested in Jesus. She says, well, so, I feel like we should do something. And I looked at Bob and I said, well, what do you think we should do? And seriously, bless this man's heart. He started to cry. He said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And she said, well, I think we should pray. Isn't that what we do? We pray. I said, sure, let's pray. And I said, Bob, why don't you lead us in prayer? And he starts crying. He's literally crying. And she again puts her hand on his shoulder and goes, it's okay. And she says, Jesus, show yourself to Bob. It's this powerful moment, life-changing moment for me. I'm crying, he's crying, she's crying. People probably 5 chairs around are crying. I had like a dozen people come to me as I'm waiting for my baggage. That was awesome. I was listening. I'm like, what? Why didn't you come be a part? It's so bizarre. So seriously, what do you love about Jesus? What do you love about it? What have you been with him lately? Have you seen him lately? Have you got a glimpse of him? How beautiful he is, how wise, how compelling, how dangerous. He's dangerous. Have you seen him? Do you know him? Do you hear him talking to you about what it's? See, because when you know him and you love him, all this other stuff clicks in. But if it doesn't start from there, the biggest danger we have of our time together is we give you techniques and ideas about what to say and how to say it. But do you know him? Does he stir your affections? Just the mention of his name cause you to pause. Jesus. Because he really is precious. I imagine in a room like this, there's plenty of us tonight that would have to honestly say, it's maybe been a while. I've been straining, I've been pressing, I might maybe even doing quiet time. But I'm not finding Jesus. I haven't been with him. I'm not abiding in him. And tonight we're going to end after our little times together by making time to pray and ask him to come and be with us and show himself and refresh and renew us. Because it can get to where it just becomes about trying really hard to not screw up or trying really hard to just hold the line instead of being filled with him, being in love with him, being encouraged by him, being challenged by him, all of the above. Do you know him? Have you seen him lately? Because it changes everything. Changes everything.